Global equilibrium has been disrupted by conflicts and political deadlocks in crucial zones, like Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Beyond these areas, the potential for a fresh conflict in the Far East Pacific is being discussed. The Pacific is evolving into a battleground that Russia and China seek to establish against the United States and the West. Naturally, the Pacific nations within this space are exceedingly uneasy with the scenario. First Taiwan, then the Philippines, followed by South Korea and Japan, where North Korea recently conducted a missile test, are on high alert for possible dangerous intentions by Russia and China. These nations maintain strong military and political cooperation with the United States, aimed at countering Russia and China. Nonetheless, Pacific actors view this bond as insufficient, and this is why nations in the Pacific are strategizing to establish their own military defense network to counter the array of risks presented by Russia and China. Japan is certainly one of these countries, with the Kuril Islands dispute with Russia, China's aspiration for a deterrent naval presence in the Sea of Japan following its blockade of Taiwan, and most recently, North Korea's missile tests in the same sea, all having driven the Tokyo government to a tipping point. Japan's defense sources consider that the real issue will begin following any potential Russian move on the Kuril Islands. The Kuril Islands issue, also referred to as the Northern Territories dispute, is a disagreement between Japan and Russia regarding the ownership of the 4 southern Kuril Islands. Consequently, Tokyo is planning to hinder Moscow from exerting pressure on it in the Pacific over the Kuril Islands. If Japan fails to respond adequately to Russia regarding the Kuril Islands, the Chinese and North Korean factions will likely perceive an opportunity. Specifically, a genuine alliance between Russia and China against Japan could plunge the Tokyo government into a crisis from which it would struggle to emerge. Therefore, considering all these risks, Tokyo is preparing for a war against Russia in particular, but also against China, one of the most significant actors in the Eastern Bloc now. We will now investigate in greater depth how Japan is endeavoring to impede Russia and China on the Pacific coast. But firstly, please do subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and give us a like to stay informed about our content. Let's get going. First, let's examine what kind of military power Japan possesses at this moment. Despite its seemingly innocuous designation, the Japan Self-Defense Forces is one of the most powerful militaries on the globe, boasting the 8th largest budget, a navy larger than France and the United Kingdom combined, more than 1,600 aircraft, and 4 flat-topped carriers. Additionally, Japan has what is assumed to be a sophisticated system for defense against incoming missiles, should war break out with North Korea. However, this is all seen as inadequate in the country. Japan's Ministry of Defense is seeking to procure interceptor military assets, including cruise missiles capable of destroying enemy missiles prior to launch. This is perceived as a plan to deter prospective Russian missile strikes towards the Kuril Islands. To this end, Japan has, in fact, taken the initial step, confirming its intention to purchase 78 Tomahawk missiles from the United States. These missiles enhance Japan's escalating role in its defense strategy in the Indo-Pacific area, in the face of potential threats from Russia and China. These deliveries of missiles will be completed by March of 2028. At that point, Japan will likely seal off its Pacific coast to a great extent from Russian and Chinese dangers. The Tomahawk is a long-range precision weapon used by surface ships and submarines of the United States military. The ranges fluctuate slightly among versions of the missile, but it can strike all targets up to a range of about 1,500 miles, or 2,500 kilometers. This range far exceeds the 300-mile range provided by the United States Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, ballistic missiles. These missiles can render Russian assets and military infrastructure vulnerable at long distances. In other words, Japan could intimidate Putin with its stockpile of Tomahawks over the Kuril Islands, where it has a profound crisis with Russia. According to Raytheon, the defense giant that produces the missiles, the United States and its allies have used the munition more than 2,300 times in combat. There are numerous versions of the Tomahawk, including the new and upgraded Block V series, which the United States has spent the last several years developing for a potential Chinese crisis. It is paramount that Japan and Australia have Tomahawk missiles. In addition to these missiles, Japan is also undertaking significant measures to safeguard its airspace from Russian and Chinese aircraft. Stronger surveillance and responsibilities, including advanced radar and aircraft, along with Japan's long-standing alliance with the United States, are thought to deter the People's Republic of China and Russia. Recent examples underscore the need for Japan to have an air defense deterrent. In September of 2024, a Russian military surveillance plane entered Japanese airspace 3 times near Japan's northernmost prefecture of Hokkaido, leading Tokyo to scramble F-15 and F-35 fighter jets, according to the Japanese Ministry of Defense. This transgression comes on the heels of an occurrence a month earlier, when a PRC surveillance aircraft violated Japanese airspace near the southwestern prefecture of Nagasaki. Beijing asserted that the incident was purely accidental, according to Japan's local news agency. Following Russia's violations, Japan's defense minister Minoru Kihara stated that Japan remains watchful against such acts by the PRC in Russia, including intrusions into the country's maritime boundaries. Minoru Kihara also vowed that Japan will take every feasible measure to detect and counter such violations. The government deems the defense of Hokkaido a priority for Tokyo, considering the island's proximity to North Korea and Russia and the importance of the sea area around it for shipping. We witness widespread investment by Japan in the region in terms of space, air, and maritime surveillance technology, and this is important to build a robust and all-encompassing domain awareness to best respond to Russia. According to Japan's 2024 Defense White Paper, Russia is augmenting its military presence in the Kuril Islands near Hokkaido, an archipelago controlled by Russia but claimed by Japan. This includes upgraded facilities for its ground forces, deploying new fighter jets, coastal anti-ship missile systems, and other weapons, as well as conducting large-scale military exercises. In response to Russia's buildup, Japan has reinforced its air and sea defenses with constant surveillance. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force operates 28 radar sites and early warning aircraft to monitor the country's airspace. The Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force is conducting surveillance with P-3C aircraft, escort vessels, and other assets, and key territorial waters are protected by JMSDF and Japan Ground Self-Defense Force observation posts. On the other hand, the Tokyo government is also increasing its military spending in response to Vladimir Putin's pressure policy with Xi. Japan is increasing its defense spending at an astonishing rate and accumulating the military stockpiles necessary for modern wars. For decades, Japan's defense spending has remained at or below 1% of its gross domestic product. Now the Tokyo government Kishida aims to nearly double defense spending to 2% within 5 years. This will be the first time this strategy has been executed since World War II. The new year has also commenced with signs of augmented military spending for Tokyo. Japan's cabinet approved a record $55 billion defense budget for 2025, as Japan boosts its ability to counterattack with long-range cruise missiles and begins deploying Tomahawk missiles to counter escalating threats from North Korea, the People's Republic of China, and Russia. The budget marks the 3rd year of Japan's 5-year defense investment under its national security strategy, adopted in 2022. The allocation is seen as part of a proposed national budget of more than $730 billion that requires parliamentary approval. The budget allocates $6 billion for a remote defense system, encompassing long-range missiles, satellite constellations, and other arsenals. The purchase and addition of Tomahawk launch equipment from Aegis-class destroyers cost a total of $11.4 million. Japan plans to expend an extra $3.37 billion to strengthen its missile defense system. This will involve the acquisition of interceptors and mobile reconnaissance radar for Okinawa, where more than half of the approximately 50,000 U.S. troops stationed in Japan are based. As part of its national security strategy, Japan will increase its annual defense spending to approximately $63 billion, making it the 3rd largest defense spender globally, after the US and the PRC. Japan is also endeavoring to strengthen its domestic defense industry through joint development projects and overseas sales. Japan plans to spend $2 billion to construct 3 multi-purpose compact destroyers in 2025 that will require 90 crew members, less than half the crew size currently needed, thanks to automation and labor-saving designs. Officials say the upgraded Mogami-class destroyers are equipped with long-range missiles, enhanced anti-submarine equipment, and high stealth performance. The destroyers, built by Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, are also competing for Australia's C-3000 frigate project. Japan's Defense Minister General Nakatani said in November of 2024 that the project would deepen cooperation between Australia and Japan and increase Japan's warship capabilities. Thus, both countries have cultivated close ties as they confront escalating threats from the PRC. Japan, along with Italy and the United Kingdom, is also developing a next-generation fighter jet for deployment in 2035 and has allocated $690 million from the 2025 budget for the project. The United Kingdom is taking further steps to ensure Japan's security in the Pacific. To this end, the UK and Japan will hold regular military exercises in the Indo-Pacific from 2025 to enhance security and further develop the capacity of each country's armed forces to act in conjunction. These exercises will also involve the United States. The aim is to make Russia's far eastern maritime areas more secure. The exercises are therefore anticipated to extend to the North Pacific Ocean. For the UK and Japan, military exercises in this region are of significant importance. The UK is already conducting several exercises in the region, where HMS Spey and HMS Tamar are permanently deployed. Next year, the Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales will deploy to the region at the head of an aircraft carrier strike group that will conduct a series of operations and exercises with partners and allies, including a port visit in Japan. With such operations, HMS Prince of Wales follows the successful deployment of its sister ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth, to the region in 2021. This support from the United Kingdom will strengthen Japan's position against Russia. The fact that Japan is Russia's neighbor is often overlooked, particularly in the West. The UK has taken this into account in its strategy. Japan has not had a land border with Russia for 79 years. However, Japan has always confronted Russia along the Sea of Japan and the Sea of Okhotsk, and was at the forefront of the Cold War in Asia until 35 years ago. Now, as the geopolitical conflict between Russia and the West reemerges, Japan is once more on the front lines. Thus, for Tokyo, the Pacific is indeed one of the areas to focus on. The submarine power of the Russian Pacific Fleet is being steadily increased, with particular emphasis on the modernization of nuclear ballistic missile submarines. The Japanese wing has therefore resolved to conduct joint military exercises with the United Kingdom in the Pacific in 2025. Oh, but the concern for Japan was not solely Russia's growing number of submarines. Satellite imagery revealed that Russia's nuclear ballistic missile submarine fleet had become considerably more active in recent years. The risk was perceived as that augmented Russian submarine activity north of Japan could strain the deterrent resources of the US-Japanese alliance in the face of the Chinese threat. The US and Japan, together with their Indo-Pacific partners, have sought to counterbalance Chinese military power. Now, with Russia's renewed activity, this strategy is expanding northwards. The US side is also cognizant of the escalating Russian threats. Washington is also aware that Beijing supports Moscow in the Pacific. For this reason, the US and Japan are pursuing a more deterrent strategy regarding military bases. Most recently on this subject, Tokyo announced that it would establish a permanent joint headquarters in Japan to command the Japanese self-defense forces during a crisis. If fully implemented, this would give Japan its own version of combatant command and simplify its coordination with US forces in the event of a major emergency. So, a US Marine Corps Coastal Regiment is planned to be established in Okinawa, which will be operational by 2025. This unit would be capable of conducting maritime interdiction operations, as it would include both an infantry battalion and a battery of anti-ship missiles equipped with the Marine Corps medium-range NMIS launcher. Such a unit would probably operate from Okinawa, but would also be based around Ishigaki, Yonaguni, and Makako, providing new capabilities close to the Taiwan Strait. Meanwhile, the US Congress wants to establish a new joint force headquarters in the Indo-Pacific to do the same for American military forces. These modifications will naturally require time. Once in place, however, they will furnish the US-Japan alliance with the beginnings of an architecture for wartime command and control. In fact, unlike NATO or the US-South Korea military alliance, Washington and Tokyo have never had a truly unified command structure. This was apparent during Operation Tomodachi in 2011, when the Allies initially struggled to respond to the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. But things are changing nowadays. Establishing joint headquarters is the first step towards a joint and unified command that can provide Allied wartime command and control, even in the most stressful scenarios. Japan and the United States are also acting in this manner. The main objective of the alliance is to remind Russia of ancient history. Nearly a century ago, one of the greatest naval battles in history took place in the Tsushima Strait, where the Japanese Navy defeated the Russian Baltic Fleet. However, the role of the Tsushima Strait during the Cold War is not well known. Tsushima was the strait of the Soviet fleet sailing from Vladivostok to the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Just as Russian Admiral Zinovy Rozhestvensky had to pass through Tsushima during the Russo-Japanese War, Soviet submarine captains had to do the same. Nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines were no exception. Submarines from the Soviet Northern Fleet made various efforts to evade underwater hydrophone systems, as witnessed by American and Soviet submariners. The same occurred in the waters around Japan. Soviet submarines usually cut their engines very close to the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Forces observation posts in the Tsushima Strait, and then sailed quietly into the East China Sea on the currents. Soviet corvettes were always anchored in the strait, and when nuclear submarines passed by, they would start their engines to interfere with Japan's underwater hydrophones. On the other hand, it was possible to reach the Pacific Ocean from Kamchatka, unhindered by narrow passages. Thus, the Pacific Fleet submarine units progressively made this peninsula their home base, and almost every month, a Yankee-class submarine would relocate from here to the patrol area, known as the Yankee Box, 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers from the west coast of the United States. In the mid-1970s, Delta IV and Delta III class submarines appeared in the Pacific Fleet equipped with long-range R-29 and R-29R ballistic missiles. The Delta IV no longer needed to sneak across the Pacific to waters off the U.S. mainland. Instead, the strategy was to retreat to waters near the Soviet Union, where it would be easier to receive support from friendly forces. The Delta IV also had another advantage. While they had to travel as fast as 15 knots when heading towards the coast, the Delta IVs could travel at a lower speed of 4 to 8 knots. This contributed to greatly increase their probability of survival. Shortly after the first Delta IV was deployed in 1974, the Soviet Union began to fortify the area around the Sea of Okhotsk. The initial step was the deployment of ground forces. The 18th Machine Gun Artillery Division was created and sent to the southern Kuril Islands for the first time in 20 years. These islands and Sakhalin Island were equipped with surface-to-ship missiles and air defense systems. In addition to these developments, a huge caldera on Simashir Island was converted into a submarine base. Today, Russia dreams of re-establishing a military autocracy in the Pacific, but Japan stands firmly in the way of Russia's Pacific dreams, not only with its own national military activities, but also with regional actors, particularly the United States and Western Alliance forces. All this collective power erects a profound barrier between Russia and China, which wants to support an autocratic order in the Pacific. In brief, with all the measures we have described so far, Japan cares too much about the Pacific to leave it in the hands of Russia and China. We thank you for choosing our channel. Many events have occurred globally, and let us explore them. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like, as it is very important for the channel's advancement. Write a comment telling us where you are watching from. Please watch the video until the end, as we will reach conclusions at the very end. Moving on, the first phase of this Pacific power struggle is unfolding with Japan, fortifying its defenses at an unprecedented pace, a strategic shift driven by the escalating assertiveness of both Russia and China. The Kuril Islands dispute remains a festering sore in Russo-Japanese relations, a point of vulnerability that Tokyo is determined to protect at any cost. The fear of a Russian incursion, emboldened by Chinese support, is the primary catalyst for Japan's current military buildup. We see Japan's investment in advanced military technologies and the acquisition of long-range cruise missiles like the Tomahawks as a clear sign of its intent to deter any potential aggression in the area. We can see that this isn't simply about border protection. It's about projecting power and creating a defensive perimeter that extends beyond its territorial waters. The sheer scale of Japan's defense spending, moving from under 1% to 2% of its GDP within the next 5 years, is a signal to regional and international powers that Japan is taking this threat with utmost seriousness. We're seeing a re-emergence of Cold War-era tensions, with the Pacific becoming the new frontier of geopolitical rivalry. The Sea of Japan, historically a flashpoint, is once again the scene of increased naval activity. China's naval ambitions, coupled with Russia's increased presence in the Kuril Islands, are creating an environment where Japan feels increasingly isolated and threatened. The joint exercises with the United Kingdom and other Western powers are not simply drills, but a demonstration of unity and a message to Moscow and Beijing that their actions will not be without consequences. The development of advanced radar systems and the increased surveillance of its airspace are the measures we can see that are clear indications of Japan's commitment to maintaining control over its territorial boundaries. And it's not just about the military. Japan's attempts to strengthen its domestic defense industry signals a desire to reduce reliance on foreign suppliers and solidify its autonomy in matters of national security. In the second chapter of this unfolding story, the focus shifts to technological superiority. Japan's focus on missile technology and air defense underscores its understanding of the modern battlefield. The acquisition of the Tomahawk cruise missiles is a game-changer, giving Japan the ability to strike deep into enemy territory. We note that this capability is not just a deterrent, but also a potential offensive weapon, and that it significantly enhances Japan's capacity for asymmetric warfare. The modernization of its naval fleet, with state-of-the-art destroyers, and a focus on stealth technology, underscores its commitment to achieving naval dominance in the region. The focus on automation and labor-saving design in its military technologies speaks of Japan's desire to maximize efficiency and minimize personnel needs. We see the emphasis on long-range capabilities as a clear indication of Japan's strategy of projecting power and extending its defensive perimeter far beyond its own borders. The development of next-generation fighter jets in collaboration with Italy and the UK is another key piece in this technological puzzle. This project demonstrates Japan's dedication to maintaining air superiority and staying at the forefront of aerospace engineering. The investments in radar technology and surveillance systems are vital for ensuring early detection of incoming threats and maintaining command of its airspace. Japan's technological strategy is not only about acquiring new weapons, but also creating a robust and integrated defense network that can react quickly and effectively to any potential danger. We see this not just as a defense posture, but as a fundamental part of Japan's broader effort to assert its position as a leading power in the Indo-Pacific region. In the third act, alliances form the central theme, underscoring the crucial role of international cooperation in maintaining stability in the region. The US-Japan alliance is the cornerstone of Tokyo's defense strategy, but it is not the only one. The strengthening ties with the United Kingdom and Australia are a sign that Japan is actively diversifying its partnerships to counter the growing threats from Russia and China. The joint military exercises and the deployment of Western naval assets to the Indo-Pacific region reflect a united front against the potential for autocratic aggression. We see this as a strong signal of intent and a warning to potential aggressors that Japan will not be isolated. The increasing military collaboration with key players like the UK and the United States demonstrates Japan's clear goal of expanding its security network and building a combined defense infrastructure to counter any threat. The plan to establish a permanent joint headquarters with the US forces in Japan is a game changer. This will not only streamline command and communication during a crisis, but also signal that Washington and Tokyo are prepared to act swiftly and decisively in the event of a conflict. The establishment of a U.S. Marine Corps coastal regiment in Okinawa further highlights the commitment to strengthening the military presence in strategic locations within the region. This is about more than just a military response. It shows Japan's commitment to building a unified front with its partners to protect shared interests and maintain stability in the Indo-Pacific, and to make it clear to any potential adversary that aggression will be met with a coordinated and powerful counterforce. The fourth stage delves into the historical context of the conflict and the strategic importance of geographical locations. The legacy of the Battle of Tsushima, a clash between the Japanese and Russian navies nearly a century ago, highlights the long history of rivalry and distrust between these nations. The significance of the Tsushima Strait during the Cold War as a transit point for Soviet submarines reinforces its enduring strategic relevance. This historical background provides crucial insight into the deep-seated tensions that continue to drive the current conflict. We can see the geographic location of these areas as a key element in the strategy of both sides. The Sea of Okhotsk, with its fortified islands, and the Kuril Islands, are all areas of intense strategic significance. The Soviet submarine strategy during the Cold War, of using the Tsushima Strait to deploy nuclear submarines, is mirrored in the present by the increased naval activity in the Pacific. The need to protect these strategic maritime passages from Russian and Chinese aggression is very much at the heart of Japan's defense strategy. History is, very much in the current day, repeating itself. The geographic realities of the region are shaping military strategy and reinforcing Japan's commitment to asserting its sovereignty and safeguarding its maritime borders. The fifth chapter explores the nuances of naval power in the Pacific region, and we see the Russian submarine fleet, once the pride of the Soviet Union, is again posing a significant threat. The increased activity of Russian ballistic missile submarines in the Pacific is a major source of concern for Japan, as they potentially threaten the existing balance of power. The modernization of Russian submarine technology is pushing Japan to reinforce its anti-submarine capabilities and to work with its allies to monitor these underwater threats. The deployment of advanced sensor technology and naval surveillance systems is becoming an increasingly important part of Japan's defense network. We can also note the history of these submarine patrols, with their roots from the Soviet Union to the western coast of the US during the Cold War. We can see that this is no longer the case. Russian submarines now patrol in waters closer to home, thus making it more difficult to intercept their activities. We can understand this shift in strategy as a calculated effort by Russia to assert its presence in the Pacific and challenge the existing US-led order. Japan's response to this growing threat is a key element of the escalating tension in this region. The historical precedent, together with modern developments, is reinforcing the naval rivalry that is intensifying in the Pacific. The sixth stage examines how both Russia and China are attempting to reassert their influence in the Pacific and undermine the current international order. We can see the construction of a military autocracy in the Pacific as a goal for both Russia and China, and that this objective is being achieved through military modernization, increased naval presence, and strategic alliances. We understand that this is a major challenge to the US-led order in the Indo-Pacific region, and that this challenge is forcing countries like Japan to increase their defense spending and strengthen their ties with allies. We can see Russia's expansion in the Kuril Islands, with upgraded facilities for its ground forces, new fighter jets, and coastal anti-ship missile systems, as a deliberate attempt to destabilize the region. The joint efforts by China and Russia to create an alternative power structure in the Pacific is a direct challenge to the existing balance of power, and that these efforts are forcing the United States and its allies to take a more assertive stance and reinforce their defense capabilities. Japan's willingness to stand against this autocratic ambition is a testament to its commitment to democracy and the existing global system. The clash of ideologies and strategic interests between these nations is shaping the geopolitical landscape of the Pacific and setting the stage for a potentially dangerous future. The final part of this exploration delves into Japan's commitment to maintaining its control over the Pacific region. We see this in Japan's comprehensive military buildup, the diversification of its alliances, and its firm stance against autocratic aggression. This is not simply about territorial defense, but about Japan's determination to protect its values and interests in the face of an increasingly unstable world. We can observe Japan's strategy as both a response to immediate threats and as a long-term plan to assert its position as a leading power in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan is not merely reacting to the actions of Russia and China, but is actively shaping its destiny and reinforcing its commitment to a secure and stable Pacific. We see Japan's commitment to preserving stability in the Pacific as an integral part of its role as a significant force in the international arena. We have looked at Japan's strategic response to the evolving geopolitical landscape, including the risks posed by Russia and China. We have seen the various steps that have been taken to strengthen its defense capabilities through investments in advanced technologies, strategic alliances, and a modernized military. We have understood that Japan's goal is to build a strong defense architecture capable of deterring any future threat to its sovereignty and its values. Finally, we understand that the Pacific is very much a zone of conflict, and that, with all of the measures and events that we have described, Japan cares too much about the Pacific to leave it in the hands of Russia and China. Conclusions. In conclusion, Japan's current military and strategic actions are a response to the growing threats from Russia and China in the Pacific. Japan is investing heavily in advanced weaponry, enhancing its alliances, and reinforcing its military presence to deter any potential aggression and secure its position in the region.